Hey everybody, Dave Bazanko here, and today we're going to talk about the only way that you can possibly stop yourself from being broke. Investing is like exercising. If you say you're going to exercise at the end of the day, typically that's not sustainable because at the end of the day you don't have the time or the energy or the desire or the motivation to exercise. The same principle applies to investing. If you say you're going to save money at the end of the month and invest that into something, some form of investment vehicle, the problem is by the time the end of the month rolls around, there's no more money left to save. You've spent it on other things that have taken a priority. So how do we solve that problem? This is the fundamental truth that most North Americans live by. They simply don't have enough cash at the end of the day to invest. The question you need to ask yourself is, do you know your numbers? What's the dollar figure you need to have to retire and by when? How much at 50, 55, 60, 65? It doesn't matter how much, it matters that you know what that number is and what the date is that you want to have that number by. What I'm about to share is not financial advice, but it is 4 principles of handling money and thinking about investments that you absolutely have to apply if you do not want to be broke. The first principle is pay yourself first. As I alluded to with exercise, the first strategy is learning how to pay yourself first. Invest in yourself before there's nothing left to invest. And the good news is this is the easiest strategy to master. It doesn't matter how much you make every month. Just go to the bank tomorrow and set up what's called a forced savings account that takes 10% of your paycheck every pay cycle and puts that into some form of investment vehicle for you. The idea is to put that into some form of an investment vehicle that's going to cause a penalty should you withdraw that money early. That's the incentive to not touch the money that's in that savings account. It's not going to take long for you to not even realize that you don't have 100% of your paycheck to play with and that 10% is being tucked away. And that 10% is going to, over time, give you the sense and feeling of control, that you've taken control over your financial future. When we apply the principles of resilience to this strategy, you have a clear vision of where you're trying to get to. And like with any goal, you've got a clear number and a clear date that you're aspiring to get to. Your forced savings vehicle is the process that you're going to use to get to that goal. And your job is to understand and look at the metrics to see if you're moving forward. In this case, especially earlier in your life, you're going to want to pay attention to the metrics and the level of risk with each investment. Typically, earlier in your career, you can handle a higher risk level in your investments because you've got time to recover if there's an issue. But the closer you get to your retirement date, that goal date, you want to move your investments from high risk to low risk so that you don't jeopardize the capital that you've built up that you're going to be hopefully living on the interest from for the rest of your life. Let me share a story. The first stock that I ever invested in was a company called Oro Minus. They were a gold mining company. My wife and I weren't focused on investing in stocks at that time. We were around 30 years old. But one of the guys in the office came into the office that day with a can't miss opportunity to invest in a gold mine. And like sheep, we followed along, invested $1,000. And over time, we watched that $1,000 and that stock continue to split until about 6 months after investing the $1,000, that stock wasn't worth the paper that the stock certificate was printed on. That was a big lesson in getting involved in a hunch without doing homework or research and what can happen when you make a bad decision, an uninformed decision. At that time, I was really basically investing in my business and I wasn't focused on understanding the stock market. So it was quite a risky stock that we bought, but we felt that we had the time to let that stock kind of go up and down like stocks normally do. And when it absolutely tanked, well, the good news was we still had the rest of our career and our financial earning potential to rebound. That risk that we took felt like a big deal at the time. Looking back, it wasn't such a big deal, but it was a big lesson learned. Back in the day, we didn't have real-time data to look at stocks, but today we have access to real-time data, real-time stock prices, and real-time prospectuses of companies so that we can get the data to make an informed decision rather quickly. Which brings me to my next point about being a resilient investor. You have to pay attention to the metrics, both before, during, and after you've purchased a stock. You need to understand whether or not there are front-end fees or back-end fees every time that stock gets bought or sold. Front-end fees mean that a broker is taking a commission off the sale of that stock at the beginning, and you want to know what the sale of that stock or what the commission, the back-end fee is going to be, if there are any, if you sell that stock before the maturity date of the stock. So you need to do your homework on how commissions get taken from your money before you actually invest in that stock. This is the amount the broker is going to make in commission, regardless of whether or not the stock goes up or down. Even online trading companies have front-end and back-end commissions. It's just your job to do your research to understand what those commissions are. That's called paying attention to the metrics. Number 2, you need to be able to increase your ability to earn. Most people have a fixed mindset about their earning potential. They believe that one job is enough, and they begrudgingly, for 30 years, maybe even 40 years, trade their time for money, and that's the trap. Once you get a taste of a steady paycheck that comes with a pension and benefits, that can be very hard to walk away from. But that's a one-to-one earning relationship, and that severely limits your ability to earn. There's only one of you, and we all work within the same constraints of a 24-hour workday. When I was 30 years old, I took a second job. I was working at Dana Canada, which was an automotive parts manufacturer, working 3 shifts. I had one young son at home, and my daughter was on her way. My import marketing company was growing, but the banks wouldn't finance our orders, so I had to self-finance the business. So I took a side hustle, a job at an automotive parts manufacturer, to pay for rent, to pay for food, while my company was growing. In both of these jobs, in both of these scenarios, I was working in a one-to-one earning relationship. I was trading my time for money, and I got to tell you, my wife was getting pretty comfortable and used to that steady paycheck, benefits, and pension. The deal I made with her was when I paid off our house through the business that I would walk away from the factory. I ended up working at Dana for 7 years, working 3 shifts for 7 years while I was growing my business. But in turn, my business was able to pay off our first house by the time I was 40 years old. I was mortgage free at 40, and that gave me the opportunity to walk away from the factory job and continue to focus on growing our business. But from a financial standpoint, this was actually taking a step backwards. It was again high risk, because leaving the factory meant, at least in the short term, I was limiting my ability to have access to excessive cash to continue investing. I was also giving up one of my investment vehicles, which was my pension. The plan was to start taking the excess cash in the business and start investing in additional real estate that would be owned by the company that would create more cash flow for the company. The reason I was keeping those real estate investments in the company was because the company was incorporated, and that allowed me to limit my financial exposure and risk in any future investments. The company was essentially a holding company. Today with the internet, there are many ways to leverage a one-to-many earning relationship at very low risk. You can create a YouTube channel with the intent to monetize. You can become an affiliate marketer. You can have brand partners, or you can create an online course, just as an example. There are many ways to increase your ability to earn, The key is to have a growth mindset as you think about your approach. If you have a desire to always be learning, then your goal is to learn how to leverage your time. Not to become a specialist at your job so that you become pigeonholed into doing just one thing with no growth potential. My wife is a healthcare professional, and this is exactly how she feels. She has a fixed mindset about her career, and that fixed mindset has severely limited her ability for personal growth. I get it, but what separates the 20% who have above average incomes with the 80% who don't is their mindset and their ability to see how to actually earn more money. The truth is, if you don't know what to do with the money you bring home, you're never going to earn enough money to make you happy. This brings me to my next point: diversify your investments. It's never a good plan to put all of your eggs into one basket. In 2007, when the last financial crisis occurred, many people lost their entire retirement savings because they had all of their investments tied up into one investment vehicle and they weren't paying attention. They were just blindly putting their money into those funds. You need to think of your investments like a coffee table in your living room. Most coffee tables need at least 3 legs to remain balanced and remain stable. It's the same with investments, and the 3 main investments that most people invest into are stocks, real estate, and investment funds. Notice I didn't mention anything about your savings account at your bank. That's because your bank will offer you the absolute lowest return on your investment, which takes me to point number 4, income-bearing assets. What is an income-bearing asset, you might ask? The simplest way to explain it is like this. An income-bearing asset puts money in your pocket, while a liability takes money out. And this can be confusing because when you go to the bank to apply for a mortgage or a loan, they ask you to list all your assets. And you list your savings, you list your house, you list your car, you list your boat, whatever you have that can be sold and become liquid. Those are what you would consider to be your assets. But most of the assets that I just mentioned are actually liabilities because they cost you money. You pay taxes, mortgage interest, insurance, utilities, etc. on your house. You pay for financing, insurance, gas, repairs on your vehicle. You get the idea. The only time real estate or vehicles or those types of assets actually become an income-bearing asset is when you're renting them out to somebody else and somebody else is putting money in your pocket and helping you pay for that asset. Your goal is to create multiple income-bearing assets, as many as you can, so that over time you have multiple revenue sources. Let me give you an example. When my son was 10 years old, I was reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then I got the book Rich Kid, Poor Kid, which helped you learn how to talk in financial terms to your children. And I eventually gave that book to Warren to read, but at around 10 years old, I started talking to him about the concepts of income-bearing assets. So after his 10th birthday, he had about $300 in the bank, and he wanted to buy a video game. And I said, well, before you buy that video game, I want to take that money and I want to buy a gumball machine. And he got furious, upset, angry. And then my wife got angry with me and said, what are you doing? He wants to buy a video game. And I said, I know, I get it. But let me go through this exercise with him so he understands how to manage his money. So begrudgingly, the two of them allowed me to go out and buy a $300 gumball machine that, while that gumball machine was being shipped to our house, I had arranged for the local Humane Society, the animal care shelter, to allow us to put that gumball machine in their location indefinitely. So I remember the gumball machine arrived. Warren and I put it together. We went to the bulk barn and bought a big bag of gumballs, spent about $20 on the gumballs, put those into the machine, and then we took it to the Humane Society and we put it in the lobby. And for the next 6 months, once a month, we would go in, we would empty out all the cash in the machine, and we would fill up the machine with gumballs. And inevitably, around each month, he would have about $80 to split with the Humane Society. So for the next 6 months, he kept depositing $40 into his bank account based on the revenues he was making from that asset. And at the end of 6 months, the Humane Society kind of looked at me and went, you know what? We'd like to keep all the profits. We're just going to buy the gumball machine from you. So I said, sure, the gumball machine costs $340. So I had actually sold them the gumball machine at a profit. And what that allowed us to do was make, over 6 months, 100% return on Warren's investment. He had spent $300, he had made $300, but then he had made another $340 when he actually sold the equipment. And that was the twist. That's what blew his mind, was he realized that an asset like a video game depreciates, it costs money, and I don't get a return on it. But an income-bearing asset is something that I can buy, put out in the world, create a duplicative process. I can buy 5, I can buy 10, so long as I've got a place to put them. And each one of those little income-bearing assets can create money for us. So, when I sold the gumball machine, I thought the lesson was over. But then that summer, Warren and I went on our first Algonquin Park canoe trip. And I'll never forget it. We were paddling away from the Portage store office. We were maybe into this trip by about 10 minutes. Warren was at the bow of the canoe and I was at the stern doing all the steering and most of the paddling. And out of nowhere, out of the quietness of just paddling on the lake, Warren says, "So Dad, I know we're supposed to have our money working for us." Now, I don't know what Warren said after that, because I was totally flabbergasted that he had actually learned the lesson that I was trying to teach him, and he had been thinking about it. And that was such a monumental moment for him and for me in my ability as a father to teach my son the single most valuable principle of investing in finances and investing in your future, which is, how do you get your money working for you, not against you? So to recap, the only way that you can stop being broke in life is to do these 4 things. Pay yourself first, increase your abilities to earn, diversify your investments, and understand the difference between an asset that puts money in your pocket versus an asset that takes money out. If you found any of this information helpful, please like, comment, subscribe. We've got more great videos coming, and we would love it if you consider being part of our community. Have a great day.